I'd like to call to order the Salem Kaiser Area Transportation Study for Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. And for the record, let's just do a quick introductions. For the record, I'm Kathy Clark, Mayor of Kaiser, and I'm Chair.
Lyle Morris, Polk County, Co-Chair.
Anna Henson, ODOT.
Kim Sapunar, staff.
Karen Odenthal, staff.
Bree Jackson, staff. Mike Jaffe, staff. And Fricky, not staff.
Soon to be permanently.
Yeah, we're all trying to find our way out that retirement door, aren't we? At least you and I.
Yeah.
Not yet. So, and then on screen, can you pop up the participants list for me again, please?
Mark
There we go.
Bernard, ODOT Principal Planner for Region 2.
Thank
And
you.
I'm Trevor Phillips, Counselor Ward 3, City of Salem.
Hey, Trevor.
Steve Dickey with Salem Area Mass Transit District Chariots.
Nick.
Nick Forty, member of the public for West Salem Neighborhood Association.
All right, and then,
Everyone.
no, it's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Lori.
I'm here.
Faithfully so. All right. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting on August 23rd. Were there any additions or corrections to be noted? If not, motion to approve as presented.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Lyle, seconded by Anna. Anna, Karen, was there something?
People are arriving. I think Sadie and Steve just.
Okay, we'll have the motion on the table, but I will wait for them to get back on the screen.
Sorry for joining late, everyone. I couldn't I'm out getting my daughter tested for COVID for pre-surgery. She's having surgery on Friday, and I couldn't join from the link in the agenda. It just would not link through. So I had to go in the back way with entering the meeting passcode and the meeting ID and stuff. So apologies.
Well, glad you're here. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, Sadie, and then who else joined?
Steve Horning. I had the same issue with the link, though. I'm on my cell phone trying to battle through it on my computer.
Okay, we tried to send out the direct link. I think Lori and I worked on that. Lori, wasn't the direct link sent in an email or in a calendar invite?
It was in the email,
Email yesterday.
including the email I sent out this morning. No, I don't know if I put it in this morning, but the one I sent yesterday.
Yeah, we've heard some people have trouble clicking in that link in the agenda cover sheet, even though it works for some people. So we're sending it out as an email as well. And in the future, we're going to send it out as a calendar invite.
Yes,
Okay.
Nice.
So-
thank you.
Kathy's happy about that.
Well, it's for some of us, not for everyone.
Oh, they probably are.
So,
Well, maybe we could just post it right on when I link through to the public meetings page, rather than having to go through the agenda to find the join link. Maybe it could be right there.
well, that's the thing, Director. People would access it from many different purposes. Some from the agenda, some from emails, and some maybe from our COG website. So we want to make sure it's available in all those manners. So however you joining us.
All right. Well, we've got folks here. The motion on the table is to approve the minutes as presented for August 23rd. Were there any additions or corrections noted by folks who have joined us? Thank you. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. The motion is approved. Public comment this time is provided for members of the public to address the policy committee. I think that's Nick. If you would like to, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Clark and members of the Policy Committee. My name is Nick Forty. I live at 2165 Turnage Street in West Salem. And I'm here today to testify on behalf of the West Salem Neighborhood Association about item D in your packet, which has to do with the congestion management process. And I previously provided written comments, but I thought maybe I could just expound a little bit on those as well. As you know, we've got two main corridors in West Salem, Wallace Road and Highway 22. And we really think that there's an opportunity here to expand some of the measures that are put in place for measuring congestion. We also think that extending an examination beyond just vehicles and looking particularly at focusing in on walking, bicycling, and transit really has an opportunity to look at that non-single occupancy vehicle component, what can be done there. And then the other part that we'd really like to focus on is looking at coming up with some sort of an approach that really hones in, looking at a hierarchy of what sort of things can be done, where to do what and when to do it. We think that's really important from a policy perspective because we think there's a lot of opportunities to do more with the operation of the system and make that more effective, not necessarily have to do a lot of these major capital investments that, as you know, take a long time to bring to fruition. And we think there's a lot of opportunities that we can do to both reduce congestion and make the system operate more effectively for a wider variety of travelers. And we really like to see that reflected in a revised policy. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We do have in front of us a copy of the email that was sent at 10:44 this morning. So this is the first we are seeing it. All right, anyone else from the public that would like to address the policy committee? All right, let's go to then item D, which is the SKATS congestion management process.
All right.
Mr. Jackson. And for those who got the printed, that's the lovely, pale pink. We used to have this scheme of figuring out the paper color.
Ever popular.
Huh? Oh, yes. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
Glad you're here.
Right, so
So am I.
so today I'll talk to you about the congestion management process. This is one of the documents that we produce that most of you have not heard of or been exposed to too often. It's one of the that started doing in 2000s. So the presentation will be split into two. First, I'll give you a brief overview of the CMP, the congestion management process, which I'll call CMP for now on. Some basics, what it is, why adopt what, and how it fits into our planning processes at SKATS. And then go into more detail about the SKATS CMP, of why we're updating it now, how it ties in with the other work that we do. I do an overview of the revised documents and then what the next steps will be. So with the congestion management process, we'll look to talk about what it is, why we're have one, and what does it cover. A CMP is a federal requirement for all MPOs over 200,000 population. So for SKATS, that requirement started with the 2000 census, and we had our first CMP by 2003. In a CMP, we're documenting where vehicular congestion is occurring, the extent and duration, how it's, whether it's non-recurring or occurring, as we'll discuss later. More importantly, the strategies and how to address the congestion, and then measuring the effectiveness. Why do we do this? Because the vets tell us to. The TMA, that's the Transportation Management Area. There's the other TMA that I always, it's not. This is MPOs over 200,000 or TMA shall address congestion management through a process that provides a safe and effective integrated management of the multimodal transportation system, etc. So first we need to, let Steve back in, define congestion. And for this process, we look at congestion as two different types with multiple causes. So we have recurrent and non-recurrent. Recurrent is the ones that you experience day to day in the same location, and they have usually can be attributed to signals or it's a bottleneck where a road necks down, something like that has happened. Non-recurrent are the ones that are when an incident happens, when you have a work zone. So the Marion Street Bridge repavement is causing some non-recurrent congestion on top of the recurrent congestion, holidays and weather. And there's data available that we'll talk about later that looks at travel of all vehicles in country. So we were able to use a software from University of Maryland to look at causes of congestion. And this was part of a study funded by Bureau of Transportation Statistics. And it's just looking in 2019 at the national highway system. So as we talked about last month, that's the interstate and then the principal arterial. So 22, 221, et cetera, Lancaster, Silverton. And so this is for the two counties. And so it's giving you a grosser look at what the algorithm is coming up with as the cause of congestion. And it's a little difficult to read. It's shown on your, it's on page 4 of your document. Yeah. And later this year, hopefully next month, we'll have access to a tool that allow us to look at the causes of congestion at a more granular level within SKATS and along corridors itself. But that's not available yet, so this is what we have. So a CMP in general is supposed to address, cover 9 topics, as it were: defining congestion, linking to the long-range plan, finding some corridors, how we're measuring congestion, the data discussion, and then some sections discussing strategies to address congestion and evaluating the results and then reporting it. So we'll go into these more detail in the next section when we're talking about the document itself. But that is your very basic 101, CMP 101. Are there any questions about that before we dive into the document?
Questions on background? Okay, let's proceed.
All right, so now into the specifics. So why we're updating the CMP now, what we did for the updating, and what the end result is. 3 big reasons for updating the CMP. We've talked to you guys a lot lately about performance-based planning approach that the feds like to do, and that's from 2012-ish. We're bringing that into all our documents. So our first CMP was in 2003, and we've been updating it off and on up to 2015. And then with 2015, we were wanting to do a bigger update. And so we want to bring in this performance-based planning. Second reason is the data has changed for years. Back in the good old days, 2004, we would have staff go around driving the car with a GPS logger, and I have a couple in our office if you want to go back into history. Lots of fun. Lots of fun. Even we like to do it. And we drive, it was laborious. You drive a corridor during a peak hour, you turn around, try not to get like, and you collect the data, and then you spend a month analyzing it. And it took 2 months to do all the corridors, pain. And nowadays, you always have big data. We get 24/7, 365 from INRIX. They give us data in 5 or 15-minute bins. Then there's Gridis, which is a platform developed at University of Maryland that analyzes all this, does it automatically, and it produces better graphics. So we revised the collections. And we need to address some federal corrective actions that were identified in our 2020 certification review. As you see on the screen, implement, they didn't like the way we presented our CMP last time. So this is to make it a little bit more coherent, make it spell out how you're doing your data collection, it's changing, and put in an implementation schedule and responsibilities, and let Steve into the room again. So for the process for the updating the CMP, last update was about 2015. It was a minor one. In 2018, Federal Highway organized a peer review workshop for us in this very room, brought together staff from three MPOs from across the country, and TAC members and other subject matter experts from the jurisdiction. So we had a good discussion, and then we created a CMP discussion working group with members of the TAC to help staff work on the rewriting of the document and devising all the strategies and evaluating. This resulted in a total rewrite of the document. Previously, the CMP was part of the long-range plan. In 2018-19, we split it out so to make it easier to update this more as we need basis. And so now I'll go through each of the individual sections. There's 12 of them in the CMP. The first one just provides that CMP 101, what it is, and why it's required. Part 2 defines vehicular congestion, discussing the recurring, non-recurring categories. Then in section 3, we start to discuss how the CMP is related to, or how the goals of the long-range plans are relevant to the CMP. There are 5 of them that are relevant to a congestion management process: accessibility, safety, efficiency, a multimodal system. More importantly, the objectives from the long-range plan, limiting the increase in congestion during peak hours, minimizing the fatalities, providing a multimodal system. The first one is obviously, the primary objective for use in the CMP. The 3 others are providing ancillary support for ways to either address congestion, providing people options, maximizing the use, or outcomes that we want to see, such as reducing the number of fatalities. We currently have 15 corridors that are just shown in the map here and in section 4 of the report. And these are maps that represent not all the roads, but a sample of the higher volume roads. And part of this is also legacy, because back in the days when we were driving, we wanted ones that it actually took a little bit of time to travel along. So there were some shorter ones we didn't do, and very long ones by 5, we could only do a couple times. But now that INRIX has this data source, it's easier to gather. For measuring vehicular congestion, that's discussed in section 5. Three primary measures, 2 of which are indices, travel time index and planning time index. These essentially provide a ratio of the time it's taking a vehicle to travel along a corridor versus how long it should take. And then bottleneck identification is something that the RIDIS platform performs automatically. So it provides us information of, based on the travel time, where locations are on the corridors of interest. We also have a couple of additional measures related to mitigation and for specific corridors that are discussed. Sections 6 and 7 talk about the data, and as I mentioned, it's pretty much all INRIX and RIDIS. We do get transit ridership from Salem Mass Transit, because most of the corridors that are the CMP corridors also have transit line on them. I-5, and that just has Route 1X. Section 8 talks about the strategies. We have a number of strategies that are presented in the CMP. Strategies can be categorized.
Sorry,
Wait, so
I-5, you talked about the 1X. Is that the number for the intercity
that's
pilot?
I'm sorry. That's 1X is bringing that one up. 1X is the current one that goes from downtown Salem to Wilsonville. The ADX is the one that's going from Kaiser Transit Station to Woodburn and then Wilson.
So that will be added in, that data
Well, it's,
or not?
yes, it will once we get it.
Okay.
They give us all the data, so we look at it. So the strategies can be categorized into 8 groups, as it were, 7 of them which are listed on this screen. We also consider whether strategies are applicable at the regional level, such as the Signal Control Center or Chariot's transit options, transportation options, whether it's available specifically specifically for a corridor, such as when you do an intersection widening, new signals, bike lanes, etc., or whether it's both. And this is just a way of categorizing this. This is just showing how many of the strategies for each group of strategy category are available. And the document has them in detail. I didn't want to bore you with very long tables on a very small screen. But for some examples, these are what we're talking about when we think about transportation demand management. We're talking about parking management, primarily in downtown Salem and the Capitol Mall. We're talking about, signal interconnects as ITS, etc. Pricing is a category of strategies that are identified but aren't being used in the area currently. And that's mainly tolling and road user charges. There are a lot of strategies in the document, potential strategies. That was only a short number of them. So don't be concerned about any of those that you saw on the screen. There are other ones that we do in this area. All right, see the tables and the document. So in section 9, we talk about implementation of the strategies. A number of these are ongoing, as I mentioned, and the Chariot TO program, both of which receive funding from SKATS. Others are more project-based. They're going to be implemented as part of a project, such as when you do interconnects or signal or turn lanes, and they're funded as projects are funded. Also mentioned in that section is who's responsible for implementing it or possibly funding the projects, whether it's ODOT or one of the local jurisdictions or transit. In section 10, we talk about how we're evaluating the strategies. The strategies will have one or more methods of evaluation. These are going to be identical to how we evaluate congestion, because we're evaluating the performance of the strategy is based on how well it's addressing congestion on corridors. A number of the strategies are labeled as supportive, and that it means there's no direct means of evaluating effectiveness. Tripcheck.com from ODOT is an example. People might use it before they take a trip, but we don't know how many people are using it to actually change their trips or when to go. But it's supportive of congestion management. In section 11, we talk about when we're going to report these. So we have yearly corridor reports that we update these in January for the previous year. We also have all this information on our transportation portal, which is a separate site from the website, but the COG, might find all the COG stuff, but we have links to it. And it provides maps and basic characteristics of a corridor so people could understand why this corridor might be congested. Is it a bottleneck? Is it land uses adjacent to it? Is it speed, etc.? As I mentioned, we'll be updating corridor reports every year. The CMP and the strategies were reviewed every 4 years. We're going to try for it right before the long-range plan update, so it can be included in the discussion. And that's the document. So what is next in the document? So we're looking for adoption of the CMP from the policy committee. And since it's part of the corrective action, it needs to go to our friends at ODOT, who have preliminary said it looks nice, for a more formal agreement that it addresses corrective actions identified by the feds, and then it gets sent to Federal Highway and Federal Transit for their review. And then they'll send us a letter after so many months saying, yes, it's good, or no, it isn't. So you notice in this document, there's no data in the document. It doesn't say where the congestion is, what the TTI. This is a document that says what we will do, how we'll measure things, and what are the strategies we're going to look at. It doesn't have the data. The data exists in other locations. This is more of a cookbook of what we'll do. Right. It's a Not the process,
result.
not a plan.
Yeah, just mentioned process. So the feds want to see that we have a compliant process to the federal regulations. And that's what we're bringing it to you to say, we think we have a compliant process. There's always improvements. The peer review we had, and Ray mentioned back in 2018, every area does it a little differently based on their geography and how big of an MPO they are, what data they have or don't have. So every area is a little different. But we are following some federally published guidelines of how to do this. So we think we have a compliant document and a good process. And then as we get the data, then we can share the data about each one of those corridors or other things we measure. Today is not a data sharing day, it's a document, a review day.
Right. And part of the data that we gather for this is being used for evaluating the projects for long-term. So it ties into that. So the CMP is not by itself, it is providing, finds, as Mike says, the process of how we're doing something. From that process, then we use the product in other planning.
All right, so yeah, this is a methodology. Questions, and I did note, Mr. Forty brought up some metrics that they were encouraging. I noticed that they are included in Table 8 under the Transportation Demand Management, the TDM, and also some of the TSM, especially access management and so forth. So some of those are covered in the evaluating strategies and methodologies. So I wanted to note that they are there. They were not in that one table, but they are in about 2 or 3 other tables in the document. I want to get really specific. I'm talking about roundabouts.
Sadie's hands up, sorry.
Okay, and that's a hard problem. I can't. If we can put, well, either that or just put the participants back up, because then I can see the list on the side and then they come up. And thank you, Sadie. And since I couldn't see this thing up, there you go.
I've been monitoring that though, so.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. And one of these days I'll move back to a fully in-person versus a hybrid life, I'm sure, because I think it is a little easier when you're in person. So the question I had is, I know that our goal is to achieve as much free flow traffic as we can at all times. And I feel like one of the things that I have noticed in kind of like, I think this falls into transportation demand management, but when you've seen like the dynamic speed limits posted, like I'm thinking of Seattle as a place where I've seen them, but I know that they're implemented in other places where they decrease the posted travel speed and they decrease the number of people that are allowed to come in on an on-ramp at any one time. And that keeps the traffic closer to what would be considered free flow based on the posted speed limit. And so one of the things that says to me is that decreasing the posted speed increases the likelihood of free flow traffic, and it eliminates some of those like compression waves that you have when you're like traveling up I-5. And so maybe I overlooked it in the table, but is that a tool we have in our box?
It is
decreasing posted speeds?
Yeah, so it's one that was identified for later years, because mostly that's what you're talking about, speed harmonization and dynamic signals work better on larger facilities such as the interstate or 217. So they have, on 217 in Portland, they have advisory speed signs that are based on the volume of the traffic going along 217. So as it slows down, you know, as it gets. There's a few places that it could be used here, but it was done with discussion with the advisory group. They were saying, you know, it's something that might come along later, not right now.
Why wouldn't it? Why isn't it appropriate right now? I'm thinking of like commercial, and it's been a long time since that was part of my regular driving pattern. But I noticed when I was driving it every day that I could make every green light if I was really smoking down commercial, right? Like I had to be moving above the posted speed limit for sure. But then I could roll with the greens, which is nice, right? Because that's free flow. Then you don't have a signal related congestion. But if we change the timing of the signals and we, you know what I mean? We phased them so that it was like, you know,
Yes.
you're gonna roll through every single green if you're going 35 miles an hour. And
I
you're
think-
gonna do that start and stop
Right.
if you're going faster than that. And it seems to me that improves both the free flow and the safety conditions around the corridor.
Right, and emissions. And that is, you know, you'd have to talk with City of Salem staff that run the Regional Traffic Signal Control Center, because they do try to optimize the flow of traffic to time the lights so you get progression and platooning, so you're not stopping at each light if you're going along the major. I don't know if it's actually
So
set
I guess what
forth
I'm
in
hearing
speed
is
limit.
what I'm talking about is beyond the scope of what's in
No,
this
well,
plan.
well, part of it is already being done. So because that, I mean, if we're talking about commercial and getting the lights to synchronize, and that's an ongoing effort that the staff, you know, Salem staff is working on. In addition, you also have investments by ODOT along Mission Street from I-5 into about 17th, where they're doing adaptive signal control so they can do all that work without having a person do it. So it's taking in what the volumes are and setting the signal timing to ensure that people can flow the flow will go uninterrupted while still maintaining the speed limit.
Can I add something? So, yeah, as Ray said, we help, the SKATS MPO helps fund the Regional Traffic Control Center. I think we provide about $300,000 a year. You look at our TIP, it's a 2-year program, so you'll see about $500,000 to $600,000 a year. For Salem staff to do that all around the region, to, you know, look at the signals, retime them when necessary, adjust them. Investments in the signal interconnects are part of that, to have the most efficient signal system out there. It can only do so much, but you know, every little bit helps, every little tweaking helps. The speed harmonization, like Ray mentioned, where the speeds change during the year, those are pretty limited to limited access facilities like freeways or parkways or things like that. You really can't do that too well. I can't think of an example where it's done on an arterial street. Maybe somewhere, but I'm not aware of any places. It's just because the traffic loads are so variable, and you have to allow access, you know, from side streets and side arterials, that you can't harmonize an arterial very well. It's basically limited access facilities like freeways.
I guess at the top, my question is, given the relationship between lower speed and free flow traffic, would a simple reduction in the posted speed limit on some of these corridors increase our free flow traffic?
If I could jump in a little bit, I want to back up a little bit before I kind of tackle that. One is that over the last several years through SKATS, we've been investing in upgrades to the ITS system, so that more and more of this work, more and more of the system is now part of the ITS system. So that was part of the issue, is that we didn't have a robust enough system, and more of it is being upgraded to be remote. So it is talking the old days where they had to go out and manually change the timing to bring it into what we're doing now. So this has been part of the evolution to get a better handle on the flow and the timing of traffic. I used to have Pacific Coast Highway along Manhattan Beach down to Redondo. I had that time to the second. I knew how many times the don't walk flashed before I had to make it to the light. And if you 25, I could get all the way home without stopping. But so I've done that game. That said, it's not so much the hard and fast speed limit, it is the capacity of the facility, the number of cross connectors, driveways, cross streets, and then the variables of pedestrian crossings. If somebody hits that button, everything changes right there. So we've got some of those variables as well. But I think to your point about having the system be interactive and responsive so that we have the ability to provide safe passage of motorized vehicles and bike ped through corridors, along our streets is very well taken. And I think that's where this data is going to help us continue to make improvements. So we get to add more, hopefully, to our system and continue to upgrade it over time so we can continue to get really good data and manage that system. The other thing that's been discussed and really hasn't been done much yet is queue jumps for transit. And there are areas where we've had that conversation.
We studied that about 10 years ago on a number of corridors, primarily along the Broadway, North River Road corridor. At that time, the conclusion was it wasn't cost effective. You might save time for transit, but at quite a cost of buying a right away and building an extra lane for 1,000 feet. So we didn't go forward with that.
So there are other methodologies as well for interactive flow using the signalization to help us relieve congestion, and part of that is improving safety. Because when you have less congestion, you do improve safety. You don't get the rear enders, like you said, that accordion business going on where somebody ends up, the smash in the middle.
And transit is going forward with the priority system, what do they call it?
Transit priority.
Transit signal priority, where if the bus is running behind schedule, they'll work with the signal to extend the green time. I can't give you the details about it, but it used to be something that was, I thought, going to be cost prohibitive, and now transit, Steve Dickey's in the room, says that it's going to be more available and less expensive than in the old days because the equipment costs have gone down quite a bit. So that's going forward as far as providing a non-auto alternative, a little more priority and efficiency along our arterials.
That's good news.
Yeah, so there are the things that are happening outside of what we can control that are providing better options. And other vendors are also providing the signal data to car manufacturers, so the car will know or can tell you that the light's going to turn red or is red. And as we go towards more automated, it will perform better, and we hopefully will have less rear-ending events at intersections.
Which is usually human impatience or. Any other questions or comments before we go to the resolution?
Trevor has one.
Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a follow-up question on kind of the first part of Member Carney's question. In terms of like reducing speed a bit to improve congestion, I guess my follow-up question is, has that been is it understood that that is true? And is it true mainly for those limited access facilities like I-5 here in the our MPO? And is that, then part of why the speed is reduced there? I mean, I think we have, reduced speed on I-5 through Salem where it drops to 60. Is that all related, or are those different topics? And then, just to really focus on that, I've heard, and it makes sense to me based on math, that it would be much more complicated on the arterials. I might prefer having, more local control and being able to drop the speed in certain areas. But in terms of, does the math show that if we drop the speed outside of the limited access facilities, does it actually make any difference? So it's just, I may be getting too granular. I don't need all these answers today, and I can get them, after today. But yeah, the staff or anyone who can help, clarify that now or later.
Yeah, I can try.
Well, I can try.
Go ahead, you first.
Okay, so you'll get apparently a couple of answers here. So the simple answer, not the simple answer, one of the answers, so the reason for speed limits on the I-5 is province of ODOT and a lot of jurisdictions, it's the state traffic engineer that sets the speed limits, and then they have speed studies where the engineers figure out what the speed should be based on the facility and other things. So it's outside of the MPO's purview. Two, you had so many questions I should have wrote now.
Sorry.
Is it factual?
Huh?
Is it factual?
Oh, is it factual? I'll let you. Well, that's an engine. I mean, so.
I was going to ask.
Okay, maybe
Say
Karen
yes.
will answer this one.
Well, if you actually look at numbers, if you reduce the speed, you actually have less capacity. I mean, so, because capacity is a point, but the reason that you have it, but then you end up with those fluctuations when you have so many people that you can no longer all drive the same speed and you run into fluctuations. It's better to slow it down and under those congested cases to make it more of a consistent speed, because consistency is better and it's also safer. So it's a safer thing. If you're not as likely to ram into the back of somebody, it makes you aware of it. So it's really kind of a, if you just reduce the speeds all the time, 24 hours a day on this section, you would actually probably have a reduced capacity,
Increases congestion.
which would then, but only during times that would be congested in the first place. So that's the.
Yeah.
None of us are traffic engineers by profession in this room, except maybe Janelle.
But
Going back to my graduate school, there's various things traffic engineers do to look at speed curves, especially for arterial, especially for interstates. This has been worked out, by universities to see what the optimal speeds are, these equations and curves and things like that. We don't do that in our day-to-day work here at SKATS, so there might be an answer to you. But a lot of this is done also with modeling, where you have to incorporate the signals, the signal timing to see what the optimal throughput would be. So can't give you a short answer, except it's a highly traffic engineering dependent need to look at every arterial and interstates and things like to find out what the optimal speed is.
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Trevor.
thanks. I your answers really helped me kind of understand some of what's always been and catch me up to speed. So I appreciate that. And I imagine that the math is just so much more complicated on the arterials. So thank you for that information. It was helpful for me.
So before I go to Sadie, let me give you a real life example. So when I was on the interchange area management plan for the Chemawi interchange, one of the key elements that we had to look at was not what was going on and off of I-5 specifically, but was how do we clear the deck? How do you get people away from those pinch points to get where they're going to go? How do you provide more outlets, if you will? Or how do you prevent more outlets? So one of the things that ODOT does not like to do is put a whole lot of driveways next to a really busy intersection, because that mix and match and the different speeds and movements creates chaos and turbulence, if you will. If you think about water moving through a pipe, if you have the water moving the same direction versus if you add a bump in there and you create turbulence, you have a lot more chaotic movement and collision between the water molecules. Likewise with traffic, when you're trying to help people who are driving their vehicles get off of a main thoroughfare and into maybe the neighborhood or into a center where their destination is, the sooner you get them off and out of the way, the faster you're going to relieve that chaos, if you will, of the different movements. So it's less so much a matter of speed and more a matter of clearing the deck. Sadie,
I think that's
go on.
a great point. And am I off mute? Okay.
you're good.
So and I'm just looking for, I know that there's a lot of traffic engineering, and I also am not a traffic engineer, nor do I desire to become one today for this purpose. But I am looking for SKATS staff to, I'm looking at this table on page 14. I think that's the sum total of, right, the tools in our belt for this congestion management program. And so I'm looking for SKATS staff to say, yes, slower speeds are considered in there. And then really to Chair Clark's point, that part of our congestion management tools are, I don't know how I would capture that. It's like reducing the frequency of curb cuts. And that seems to me like it would be, maybe it's like an element we need to put here so that it makes its way into the city of Salem's TSP, because it looks like most of these are in city of Salem control when it comes to permitting and design. And that's where I'm thinking those curb cuts come in. Anyway.
So Sadie, that's covered under access management.
Okay. And which one is the speeds? Or is that in there?
That's for the curb, that's for all the different access on and off.
I would say the speeds are not a strategy identified, and the reason is so recently, and maybe still is, speeds are not something that we deal with. They're set, there's a speed study, there's an entire process that goes on, and for a long time it was hard to change the speeds. That changed with Portland, and I think some other cities have the options of changing there, so that's not considered.
Okay, so it's not a tool, nor can it be, is what I'm hearing.
We'd have to talk with the local jurisdictions if that's a tool that they are considering using. So these are all tools, these are tools that they're going to be implementing. So how are they going to do that? We can have that conversation.
So this is a document like a cookbook I mentioned earlier, where it's separate from their long-range plan, because we know we will learn more by doing this and getting the data. We'll learn more when we have these strategies implemented, and we can modify this cookbook, yearly, every 2 years, whenever is appropriate, to say this is a new strategy that's being promoted by Salem or ODOT or whatever, and we will use that. So the one about changing the speeds, it's kind of as Ray mentioned, it's a provision that has long been held by ODOT, and cities didn't have a lot of leeway. That is changing the last couple of years, starting in Portland, and they're expanding it out to other jurisdictions. I don't know the current status for every jurisdiction in our area, whether they are allowed to and have to go through a process. That's the thing I haven't quite studied up on precisely. So if it is one where, let's say Salem says, yeah, we're going to change all our arterials from 40 miles an hour to no more than 35 or something like that. And they're doing it for multiple reasons like safety or congestion, then it'll be something we could put in here. But until we're at that point, I wouldn't put it in here yet. We can always modify it when that happens.
And I would probably put for the last piece is that speed limits are posted, and when you've got congestion going, you got to slow down anyway. So there's some other elements that go into the rate at which somebody operates a motor vehicle or a bicycle or transit vehicles than just the posted speed. So I think there are some elements of conditions in that as well.
And the traffic engineer.
Traffic engineer.
Who knows what they're talking about, unlike
Good, an expert.
yes, unlike me. Lanny.
Hi, sorry, I came in a little bit late and so I missed some of this, but I did want to highlight basically what Mayor Clark, you ended up saying. The big thing with speeds to remember is that posting a speed limit is not going to be 100% effective at changing motorists' behavior. In fact, a sign is, shown to be pretty ineffective by itself. So when we talk about setting goals to lower speeds, it's really not as simple as just plastering, every arterial with a lower speed limit, because people are going to drive what they feel comfortable driving. When we do speed studies, ODOT does go through and they will collect data on what speeds are actually being traveled, and then base their recommendations and requirements on those speeds. So even if something seems like, well, it would be so much safer if we could lower it, 5 or 10 miles per hour, people won't necessarily drive it that way. And then unfortunately, you could end up with some people following the posted speed limit and some people not, and you end up with a large speed differential, which causes a bigger safety issue than you had maybe previously. So it's not quite as simple as simply trying to post lower speed limits.
And Lanny, let me give an example that people can look at. We've got two in Kaiser. One is Dearborn Northeast. When we did the upgrade to that corridor between River Road and Verda, we put in the curbs, rain gardens, and separated sidewalks and so forth. The width of the travel lane didn't really change significantly, but the perceived window of space did, because of the placement of trees, and it actually creates a visual of it being a smaller space, which has been demonstrated in our traffic studies since then to have slowed traffic down. Another one that we did was Sunset. Because of our right-of-way issues, we could not put in curbs, gutter, sidewalks, but what we did do was we actually extended the pavement, but we delineated the travel lanes for motor vehicles in a smaller space. So those very, very broad lines, and then people being able to park along there as well, created, again, that smaller sense of space. And our traffic studies are showing that that engineering achieved the lower speeds, the more consistent speeds, and then that gives time for the situational awareness in both of those corridors. Lanny's absolutely right. When you use some of these design elements, it creates a sense of space in which you are operating your bicycle, or you're walking, or you're operating a motor vehicle, and then how you operate within that space. We have some other examples in Kaiser, but I think those two are really illustrative of what we're talking about here. But what I want to do is, can we wrap this up and get to the resolution so we can continue the agenda? Are we good with kind of where we're at now with the discussion that we've been having? Lyle?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 22-18 to adopt the SKATS congestion management process for the 2022 year.
Second.
It's been moved by Lyle, seconded by Trevor to adopt resolution 22-18. Further discussion. Sadie.
Just a request that we look at this again next year in view of some of the tools that you just discussed as being very effective. I would love to find a way to more overtly include those as kind of possible methods to decreasing speeds and congestion and increasing our overall the efficiency and flow of our traffic system. So if we could take this up in a year, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Let's go on to item E, which is the tip management process updated. Karen.
So I haven't been actually bugging you too much about the tip. Been merrily working away, but there is one area that policy committee does have the discretion of, because most of the tip is really just an informative document on what we did. But the policy committee has the discretion on helping to determine what is considered full tip amendment. I guess I should go into what a tip amendment process is. It's the way that we manage all of the projects in the tip. You've seen me come month after month after month. So you know that the tip is a fluid document. It's not something that stays the same for 4 years. There's always changes. And we have a matrix that explains what we need to do to update the tip. I actually have a link right here, and I sent it in the memo that you have of where on our website you can find our tip modification process. So with that, you can see what level of a change requires what effort. About a year ago, ODOT updated the tip amendment process. They agreed with Federal Highway. Most of the requirements for this process come through federal regulations. So ODOT and Federal Highway and Federal Transit got together and they said, okay, we can relax the rules a little bit. And we, as an MPO, did not make those same changes at the time. So we've been following the old rules because I knew this was coming around. And I would like to update the tip amendment matrix. So I took a look at our chapter 8, which is our tip management process, which describes this, and went through and updated the changes to be consistent with ODOT. And at the same time, I thought I would actually look at the text. And I updated quite a bit of the text, which you see in your the memo that I sent you, and I gave you a track change for actually the chapter. One of the most important things that you said is what is differentiating between the two types of amendments. So there are times when I've come to you and I said, this is a tip amendment A, or this is a tip amendment B. We do not do tip amendment A's very often. A tip amendment A is an amendment that usually requires an air quality conformity determination, or an AQCD. It is usually when you're adding travel lanes to things like freeways. So you've seen that about a year ago, we had one of these projects when we added northbound lanes or southbound lanes on I-5. That required this extra effort. It takes longer to do it. We have to go through consultation. There's more public review. It's a 30-day public review period. And I just wanted it to be more clear in the document what these differences were. But most of the proposed changes are actually to make it much easier. And these are more of what triggers a full amendment. To be honest, ODOT does not have a differential A and B. They have one type of amendment. We only have a separate one because of the extra effort that we want to be able to shorten the time to do an amendment as opposed to 30 days for everything. So, we can do that. We can separate that. But one of the changes was to change project limit that triggers a full amendment. So previously it was any project change that was more than 1/4 of a mile. And now it's an increase in project length greater than a mile. So a decrease does not trigger a full amendment. An example of this was the signals that they were doing on Portland Road all the way through town, and they shortened it by one signal, which was more than 1/4 mile, which triggered a full amendment. So that would no longer be considered a full amendment. They also increased the dollar threshold triggering a full amendment. And again, things cost a lot more. It's very hard to add money to anything that doesn't trigger that. So as you can see what these changes are. Now, Federal Transit did not change their trigger. So it's still a 30% for all transit. Typically, when you see those, it's because we're trying to guess what transit's gonna get for money, and then we didn't guess within 30%. So there were a couple of other textual changes to the actual matrix. One of them was adding language to include that adding or modifying our UPWP, our Metropolitan Planning Project. They are administrative modifications because that's what ODOT's added that to theirs to make it clear. I think it was because it was never clear in the first place, and this is more clarifying it. Adding capacity and impacts air quality is considered a full amendment type A. Talked about that. We now have carbon reduction funds, and I had not updated it to add the congestion mitigation air quality, the CMAQ funds. So just basically bringing it up to speed there. And then we noted that temporary emergency repair projects are not added to the tip, therefore they don't need to be added to the tip. They didn't have to be added. Added this lovely little chart because I did it for our website, and it's probably hard to do, but it really helps you to understand what is the difference between the types of amendments. And one area where I didn't really talk about much was the tip adjustment. The tip adjustment is not something that the ODOT has. And this is because the policy committee, you can make it more, there's more things fall under an amendment. You can't make it less, right? But there are certain things that ODOT says is not a full amendment, but the policy committee still wants to see. These are what are called adjustments, and they are typically things that involve MPO money. So if any time we're adding any amount of money to a project, you want to see it, it's a resolution. Those are the tip adjustments. I did not propose any changes there. And then what's administrative modification? These are the types of things, the different levels of outreach that we go through for each of the types of tip modification. So really, all I'm asking today is I'm going to stop hearing. I could show you the changes in which I had up, but I think that if you have any questions, I can bring them up. But what I'm really asking you is just direction as I'm preparing the draft tip. Should I incorporate these changes into that document or not? You have the discretion. You can keep the lower threshold. You can't increase, I'm sorry.
So in today's market with the increase we're seeing right now, I mean, the dollars are so outrageous. And before it was so tight, you had to change every project. How many times?
Well, it's constantly. I still have to change them, but I don't have to go out for public comment.
Yes. In the realms of.
Yeah, I can do the changes myself and then just report to you as I always will.
That's all publicly posted.
Yeah.
So this makes perfect sense to me.
Any other questions? Sadie?
Thank you, Chair Clark. Curious about, I do think that a quarter mile is tiny. But I'm curious what data informed your decision to propose a 1 mile threshold?
I would have to refer to ODOT because this was an ODOT proposed change. I think it was because it just
Crickets.
it was more to do with a quarter mile. It was just tiny, but it was more, okay, you're increasing it by a mile. Okay, that's substantial. If you don't want it to be that much, that would be fine. But as I went through to see I went through the last 5-year history of amendments. There was only one that of all those amendments that would be different under these rules than before. And it was
Okay,
just,
that is exactly the kind of information I was looking for. I didn't realize that it was an ODOT proposed. That's probably my oversight, not doing a.
oh
close
yeah,
look
it's
at the
it's just to
material.
be consistent with the ODOT. Because Federal Highway said, yep, we can live with a mile, and they said, okay.
Yeah, no, having the like only one project would have been evaluated or considered differently in the that's perfect. Okay, I get it. Seems like it makes a lot of sense then.
Yes, so there's no further questions, or we can deliberate. What the staff is asking us to do is to direct staff to incorporate the proposed changes to the tip management process in the SKATS fiscal year 24-29 update as presented. Motion?
I'm happy to make the motion if it hasn't been made yet.
Okay, moved by Trevor,
I'll second.
seconded by Sadie. Any further discussion? Well done, Karen. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. I've heard no objection, motion passed unanimously. Thank you. I love that flow chart, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Totally.
It was very easy and simple to do, and that one was like, this is really what we do. So, okay.
That's what makes it even better. All right, let's go to F, which is the SKATS fiscal year 21-26 tip amendment. Julie and Karen.
Speaking of amendments.
Speaking of which,
So, the right page here. Okay, so this is an example of what's happening in our world. In the current tip, there is a project and you approved this when we went through the tip project selection for the 21 tip. There's a project in there that includes 5 pedestrian crossings. This is kind of the little map showing where those 5 crossings are, the location of these crossings. I should let Julie explain, but what has happened is they are in the design of it, and guess what? Project costs have been escalated to the point that it is no longer viable to actually fund all of these projects. So really, I can let Julie talk to what the proposal is. But there are 2 choices. One of them, because the policy committee has actually really much set as a policy, is we want to make it current projects whole. That is the priority, is to make current projects whole. This project app can be scaled. So
yeah, I mean,
I have that thing you sent me to, so.
okay, I don't think we'll need it, but so the package of improvements, original budget was 1.4 million. When, our engineers are starting on design, they always do a sort of, okay, let's make sure everything is still on track. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Basically to the tune of an additional $1 million that would be needed to construct all 5. This particular project, because it is a series of 5 crossings, is very scalable. And so our recommendation, our request is to actually reduce the number of crossings rather than to add the $1 million. Obviously, we would, accept $1 million if SKATS wanted to do that. But we recognize that not only our projects, but other projects are likely going to be experiencing similar conditions in the near term. And because this one is so scalable, it seems to make more sense to reduce scope here and reserve what limited future funds we have for other projects that maybe are not so scalable. I know when Hayesville, Marion County project was, had a similar issue, they did look at, could we scale it by only doing sidewalks, I think on the south side, rather than on both sides. And in that case, it really did not save that much money and it was not very scalable. So we are fine with reducing the scope on this. We would recommend dropping one of the crossings on Lancaster, which is a crossing between Sunnyview and Wolverine. Keeping the other one on Lancaster, which is near Weathers. Keeping the crossing on River Road North near the Fred Meyer that connects into that sort of neighborhood that's just south of River Road Park. And then keeping one of the two crossings on State Street. They were already relatively close together. They were identified through our State Street corridor study. We would like to reserve the decision of where to put it. We'd like to follow up with the neighborhood associations as well as make sure that transit's on board with which one makes most sense for their transit stops. So anyway, that's our request. I can provide additional information if needed.
Thank you, Julie. Questions for Julie or Karen on this proposal?
I do want to at least clarify, unless there's a question,
Not yet, but
that this doesn't mean that these crossings would be gone forever. That Salem would be looking for other ways to fund them. They could bond projects.
Well, they basically will go back into our larger pool of, needs, which greatly exceeds these 5 crossings. And go back into the pool of looking for funding, looking for opportunities for, partnering with development if possible. Yes, it is a priority for us to improve crossing. And I see Trevor has a hand up.
Trevor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. So, I mean, I totally understand that costs are up and that we want to complete projects. So I just want to double check the recommendation to keep the 3 that we're keeping. I mean, I assume that for some, scoring of utility and benefit to our community, these 3 score higher in some way than the other 2, or is there another consideration that I'm not thinking about?
That's basically it. I mean, the State Street ones are pretty much tied. And so it's more having one crossing there is better than the current situation.
Okay.
And it's better to do one there. On the River Road North one is, it's been a long-standing priority. And then on Lancaster Drive, if you look at the street, the development along that section, that it's the Kaiser Permanente offices on the east side of Lancaster, and then there's that shopping center on the west side of Lancaster. There is a signal at both Sunnyview and at Wolverine. While the school is located sort of behind the Kaiser Permanente, they don't actually have access out mid-block. So we should not be seeing students crossing there. So yeah, I think in terms of destinations, it's a lower priority.
Okay. So, and then, the other option is to ask for $1 million, but I get the sense that that's, I don't know, help me understand or help the public understand, what does that really mean if we ask for, future funds moving forward to help fill these other 2 of the 5 projects in? But for example, does it impact anything on table 1 in the background? In the notes on this, the things that we've already added additional funds added to projects that are already in the queue.
I don't necessarily see it directly impacting those ones, although possibly.
It shouldn't affect those. However, so that was the money that we've added recently.
Right.
But
So
what I think
Table
is,
2.
look at table 2 is
Okay.
this is the coming down the pipeline. These are the ones that are going to come to need to be obligated in the next year or 2. There's $33 million worth of projects coming down the pipe. There's going to be a need for those. We have about $7 million that I don't have programmed, and that's through 27. That's future year money. I don't have any money now. We gave it all to Hayesville. I have no money now. We have maybe 7 million that can go to future projects. So that's why I provided this information. So you can see we're probably gonna come up short, and this is one project that can be scaled. As important a project it is, I would recommend that we would scale it back as opposed to give it money that I don't actually have yet. I would have
Okay.
to borrow.
Fair. I appreciate that follow-up and explanation. Thank you.
Additional questions?
So the reason I actually brought this to you as opposed to an amendment to do this is because it's sort of a policy choice. And before I released it for public review, I really needed to know what the amendment was. So that's why it was either this or that. We have time. This doesn't have to happen immediately like so many of them do. So we have a little time I can do that.
Yeah, and I'll say that we are designing this in-house with our engineers, and so they basically are starting on the ones that are higher priority. So that if you guys decided you instead wanted to add more money, they could still, add in the design of those, but they're starting on those other ones.
A number of the projects that we have on the table too are urban upgrades. We have a bike ped facility in a number of these, Verta being one of them. And we're going to be making significant investments in the multimodal and complete streets programs and facilities with these dollars. So, and this doesn't preclude adding more crossings later on if Salem believes that they are warranted due to higher need.
Or we get more money or less cost.
Yeah, if suddenly there's a big,
We'll take it.
recession, don't want it, but
No,
if costs go down, inflationary pressures reduce and more money is opened up, we would be ready for it.
And maybe there will be less cost on that project.
So the amendments not in front of you right now, it's more of a choice. Which of those two options do you want to go for? And then Aaron will develop an amendment that will go out. This has to go out for review.
This has to go up.
So-
It will be
So then it would be
a,
on,
reducing scope by half.
so then it would be at your next meeting next month, we're actually approving the resolution. But right now we need which direction of the two options do you want to go?
all right, let's put a motion on the table and debate it. Well,
I'll place the motion that we reduce the number of projects. So we complete the ones, the three that are identified. And then hopefully we can go after funding to put some of the others back on in the future.
all right, so we have motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Moved by Lyle, seconded by Anna for, I'm gonna take a look at the screen, the top one. Yes.
Again,
So that is, thanks, you just took it off. To remove the two crossings from the scope as requested by the city of Salem. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously.
So you will be seeing this next month.
October sounds so far away. I was like, no, that's this weekend. All right. Item G, which is public outreach for the MTP. Kim.
I have a memo in your packet today, which is a bit of an update in this time of the update process for the MPP. Ray has proposals to bring back projects at that point of sort of gathering them. And traditionally in the past, we do put up a interactive map of what those are, and we release that to public comment. We always do that, but I have a memo for you today, just to kind of give you a little bit of what our approach is for some stepped up outreach. We'll always do that, but it's very convenient to have a mechanism to gather input, which will be a little bit of an overview of what it is and the ability to look at a map and to leave comments. And Ray will be able to finish an initial ranking based on the criteria, so we get that information. But I have an initial list from some of the work that the city of Salem has done and Chariots has done in both of their recent work with Power Salem and the Long Beach Transit Plan, with community groups that have been that have been responsive, have been interested in the work that they're doing, and they passed along the contents and said, give these people a call. So this is an initial list of organizations that I plan to call, contact, go and be able to meet, visit, and whatever is appropriate for them in terms of information. If they have a meeting they'd like me to attend to, or bring along Ray, or bring along Karen for that matter, because the TIP is still in process. It has less interest at this point since there aren't new projects going in. The long range plan has got, you know, a fresh set of projects that people would like to see and make available. We always do a set of outreach. We do press releases, we update the website, we make things available, we do our MailChimp, our email, all of that will continue to take place. But this is kind of a first initial list of organizations we'll specifically go and talk to. So that's kind of just a brief update, and I am absolutely open. If you have other organizations that you would like me to contact, please let me know. You don't have, you can tell me today, or if you think of them over the next couple of weeks, that will be available and is going up. I basically have all the pieces in place so that it's going to be kind of on the heels of in this next week or so that we'll be able to make it available, give links, put it into the transportation hub site that we've got all the information for, and be making that available. And then basically, however people would like to kind of get additional information or give feedback to us. It's a mechanism of being able to say, we have this here, you can scan the QR code or see it. But if they would like to, we have brochures, we have people, we have the ability to give a PowerPoint, certainly provide information in that we would like to hear with that.
Love it. Sadie?
Thank you, Chair Clark. And thank you, Kim. You know, this just like warms my heart and fills me with joy. I so appreciate your efforts in this direction. And I know it's really hard work, and this kind of like capacity building and relationship building is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so, you know, I'm here to support you and offer whatever encouragement and other support I can. One thing, just as a reflection on what we've tried to do at DLCD, because we're trying to move in this direction as well, is sort of in our conversations, in our initial conversations with different community-based organizations and community serving organizations, and the tribes, we do this in our tribal consultations as well, is we identify the priorities for the different groups that we're talking to. And then we look for places where we have an intersection between the work that we're proposing and you know, their kind of like top line interests, so that I'm not dragging them through my whole policy agenda is really and so I don't know if that would be useful as a way to guide conversations with these groups and sort of share you know, the different kind of like prioritization and investment opportunities that might be considered within a TIP. But to the extent that it is useful, or that I can be useful in any capacity as you're moving forward in this, and I will think about other groups, but bravo, keep up the good work, and thank you.
We have learned over time not to bombard anybody with a 400-page document.
Except for your policy committee, right?
That's right. We're certainly looking at what would be most beneficial or an intersection.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And we, of course, have found, you know, increasingly that online widgets and snippets of information are the most easily digestible, and they can see them, and it's as simple as, we've got this up on our page now, you know, what is the long range plan? In fact, if you look at our main page, we're not even calling it by the letters until you dig deep down later. It says long range plan, short range plan, because even that concept is, you having to keep track of the letters that are associated takes months of practice.
Ha ha, Trevor. So yeah, and to your point, we have a community diversity engagement committee, so touch base with me on that and see if we can schedule time as this progresses, so we can let them help us with how we can continue to engage more with the community.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go on then to chapter 6 on the financial for SKATS 23 to 2050 MPP.
So this was one of the chapters that we were just bringing to you as informational, keep you abreast with what's going on. A lot of discussion about how project costs are escalating. So this is also to talk a little bit, mainly to talk about what revenue we're forecasting over the next 27 years. A lot of this work for the federal funds came out of a ODOT-led group that includes all the MPOs in the state and the transit districts. And so that group looks at federal funds over the next until whenever 2051 is, so 28 years, and forecasts that for specific entities. It also forecasts what the state revenue will be for the cities and counties. Well, in general, the cities and counties. So in your yellowish attachment, if you have one, and if you got a PDF, you didn't get one until this morning. It's chapter 6, and it is preliminary, and it won't be finalized until the project list is at a draft form for public review. Because we need to show in the long-range plan financial constraints, so that is the revenue anticipated will pay for so many projects. So some of the numbers are highlighted. They will change before the next time you see them. Some of the words will change. And of course, Salem has their bond measure in currently November 8th that they need to pass. Otherwise, I need to change some numbers. No pressure there, Julie or Trevor. But I'm just going to briefly go through the tables to give you an idea of sort of funding like we're anticipating happening. So for SKATS, we receive federal highway funds over the next 27 years, about 331 million. In the chapter, there's also discussion of where the funds can be used. There's a nice matrix that would look horrible on the screen. It looks pretty nice on the 8x5 11. And it's also on the tip because we share some of the work around here. Where the funding streams can be used, which is always important. And then it also has a little discussion about, well, carbon reduction is a new program. Where is it? What is it? What's it being used? Protect is a new program. What's, is on top of the usual TAP and CMAQ that you're all familiar with from previous years. We also have Marion County will receive some SDP, so Surface Transportation Program funds over the next 27 years. The number that we're forecasting is just for what they will likely use within the SKATS boundary, not the entire county. Transit receives transit funds receives funds from federal transit to tune about 273 million over the next 27 years. And then we have state funds. And you also notice that I broke these down to the first 10 years and then from 2033 to 2050. That's just artifact of how the feds say we can do some funding. I don't follow all their rules, but I'm splitting it out to, I don't do revenue bands, is what I mean. I do numbers. So I can do bands if you want, let me know. That would be for 2033 to 2050. But this is just giving, this is easier to figure some things out. State funds, we, the highway funds that are going to local jurisdictions, about 750, that's spread upon capital, O&M. So it's not all just building sidewalks or building a road, it's maintaining things. ODOT funds, these are just Region 2 funds that are going into projects within SKATS. This does not include, this is just the highway funds, does not include any possible new bond or legislative actions that identify that a certain project might get funded. Transit funds that are led by the state, or some of these are new out of HB 2017. Then we have the local funds. These are, you'll see a big number under roads. That's mainly Salem and their bond measure. So if you take out 550 million, that's how much is getting local funds from system development charges and other funding. Transits, local fundings are primarily property tax and the revenue from the then we, as part of the financial constraint, we look at the revenue and then we look at how it's being spent. Part of that is on operations, maintenance, preservation. There's actions on the regional roads. There's also the operations of regional services, such as transit service, local, and lift. So Chariot's lift is the ADA service. There's also the regional programs. We talked about the Chariot's transportation options and the regional traffic signal control center earlier today. There's other programs that are supported by the MPO, including people on the side of the table and other things that will probably go up to be 97 million over the next 27 years. Transit service is anticipated to cost about 1.9 billion over the next by 2050. Based on numbers from transit. Then we have a rough estimate of how much money the locals will be spending to maintain the current roads that they own, including ODOTs of about 690-ish or million. And then the part that we'll be discussing with you next month, hopefully, and November, is the project list. And these are all the projects. There's currently 263 projects in the database identified that could be funded. And each time we do a long range plan, we throw everything back into the hopper, we evaluate everything, and we discuss it with the TAC. And then we parse it out by how much funding is available. Then we'll bring it to you to ensure that those projects are the ones that should be on the included in the financially constrained list for public review next year. And we'll be bringing that to you this year, very least January of next year. Since we don't have a currently scheduled December meeting for the PC, let me know if you want one. And that's the end of my conversation.
All right, questions or comments? And of course, as you read through this, if you have additional comments, please feel free to send emails to Ray. So those can be added, especially if there's corrections that you note. Okay. Thank you very much. This actually was very helpful, and I've noticed over time, maybe I'm getting more adept at the language or the readability is getting better. Either way, I'm learning to speak the language after what, been 16 years. All right. Let's go on then to the tip modifications. This is we're dealing with.
This is just the things that I tend to approve and then let you know about. Usually I include all of them, but this case, these were all staff approved amendments. These are nothing terribly interesting in there. The Salem Industrial Drive Northeast Rail Crossing slipped again. That's going to slip to 23. And then the I-5 Salem to Albany. Remember last time we talked about revising the description. Here's some money to actually pay for the additional fiber optic. So, and then the first one on the list was the Oregon Household Survey. I warned you that was coming. It came in two amendments. One, we took it out of the one, and the other one we put it in this one. It just happened to take 2 months to do it. That is it. If there's any questions on any of those.
Okay, any questions on any of these projects or why we're making the changes? Going once, twice, seeing none. Thank you for keeping us up to date on these. When somebody asks a question, we actually know where to go on the answer.
Always come to us too.
Mike, I know I saw it somewhere. I don't want to go back through 10 packets. Can you just tell me because you have a quicker database than I do? Okay, any other business? So going over some of the upcoming events, the on-pop meeting is October 28th. Do we have a location?
I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'd have to get back to you. I don't remember.
Is it okay?
So it's Eugene, right?
No, think it's Eugene.
I
Okay,
will find out and let you know.
Okay.
That's good for me.
fabulous. And then for attendance on the 28th of October, since that is literally right around the corner. I'm a yes.
Yes.
You're a yes.
You have to come in costume.
Oh, you are gonna be so sorry.
Star Trek costumes, I think.
Yeah, I have my uniform. Yeah. I know, right? You've gotta get with it. Of course, you know, which is it, next gen? So.
Lower deck.
Oh. I used to drive Mayor Lori Christopher crazy because Richard and I were both Trekkies and we'd start talking about stuff and she'd just roll her eyes at us like, "You two stop." Or like, why? Okay.
Mayor Clark,
Wow.
we need to visit Ticonderoga, New York, where I grew up. They've got a huge Star Trek museum with a lot of the original set pieces there.
Done.
I will road trip that with you. I would love to go back to Ticonderoga.
That would be fabulous. One of my favorite things was when I was sent by my agency to some FAA training. It was in DC and I beelined it over to the Capitol Mall as much as I can, was be able to see the original model of the Enterprise, Starship Enterprise. That was the highlight of my trip. Oh, God, that's why I love you guys. That would be fabulous. Okay, so we've got folks for the OMPOC meeting. The Oregon Transportation Commission meeting will be in Hillsborough and on Zoom on November 17th. Our next policy meeting will be on October 25th. And Ray, you said something about the December one. We're not going to be having one, thank you, because I have a special family event that day.
Yeah, it's the week of
Christmas, yeah. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's where as many people as possible are taking vacation time. And yeah, so.
I think our office is
Yeah,
closed
we'll be
anyway.
closed between.
Well, and there you go. There you have it right
It's
there.
my birthday. We can't meet on my birthday.
It's also my son's birthday. Strella? Yeah,
You had the same birthday?
yeah, December 27th.
No idea.
No cake.
No cake, no cost.
Dang. Okay, well, we'll get you in November. All right, the next TAC meeting will be on the 12th, and you also have a list of the planning projects
Yeah, the next page.
on the top of page 5.
Can I make a few notes about that?
Would you please?
So, you heard about the I-5 per click interchange plan at MWAC. The long-range transit plan, they are developing the draft now. They recently had a joint meeting with Salem, and they are coming to us, not in October, in October.
That's
This will be
right.
changed.
That changed.
They,
Today, the PC agenda went out.
yeah, so they're gonna come in November, I believe, to kind of share with us their long-range plan. Yeah. The Corden Kubler Quarter study is in progress by most Salem and Kaiser staff, and we have Karen on that committee. I'm going to skip the next one just for a moment. The Oregon Travel Survey is still going forward with the scoping keeps being worked on, and designing the details of the survey, and with implementation next spring. And it's going on all over Oregon. So not just our area, but all the metro areas and outside metro areas. Let me go back to the one right ahead of that is the SKATS Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan.
I know. I tell you, I didn't update that part of it either, but it is.
We're going to probably be calling it metropolitan, so because it's not regional, it's not going out to Marion, Polk County in the rural areas. It's really focused on the SKATS area. So We had a notice to proceed after doing all the contract signatures and everything. That was a long slog. But now we have a contract, we have a consultant, we have the technical advisory committee. We had our kickoff meeting yesterday. I've been telling Karen that was such a nice kickoff meeting. It seems like all your local staff, some of them in the room here, are very excited to get started and excited to see what comes out of this study. It's being funded with our PL funds, the planning funds we get from the federal government. And it's going to take about 16, 18 months, something like that.
Yep.
There's a public involvement, a big public involvement component. We'll reduce some focus groups. We'll of course have open houses and outreach. And a lot of this data crunching of the accident data, and then looking at local plans. So it's quite an ambitious project. And not only that, but we have a couple of goals. One is to have a plan that will lead some direction once you get involved as a policy committee about what our safety plans are, our goals, what do we hope to achieve based on this kind of new study of what our highest priorities are. But also having a kind of a plan that's compliant to some new programs set up by the federal government of having a safety action plan. If that meets those requirements, it allows us to apply for grants under the Safe Streets for All program, which is a new federal funding program for the next 5 years. So some areas that already have a compliant plan have already applied for money in Oregon. Eugene applied for a grant. In East Eugene, our consultant was telling us that Walla Walla has already applied this year because they have a plan. Once we have either a completed plan or a mostly completed plan, we can start applying for those kind of grants as well. So it's gonna serve several purposes. One is locally, what's our direction as an MPO area for safety? What are the issues? What do we need to focus on? And also, can we get federal grants? So I'm really excited about it. It's long-term in the coming, and we'll keep you posted about it.
Fabulous. Show me the money.
One project I'd like to see included in that is Highway 22 and 51 in that listing. We are starting our outreach for landowners in the area next week. Yeah.
Okay.
So that project's moving right along. So
Yeah, we should probably get an update. We should talk about when we want to do an update to the SKATS. So everyone here in our board kind of knows what's going on. with
Yeah.
that.
Did Kumar come to MWAC? Is that where we had our last update for the Oregon 51?
I think so, yeah.
So he has come to SKATS first. Oh, it was for sorry, that was for the project here in Salem. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was for the,
So the interchange is actually still in the MPO area. Maybe
Yes.
part of the interchange area might be a little bit outside, but most of the interchange.
most of it's within SKATS.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this body should be informed how that's going, so we
Okay.
know how to coordinate on.
Yeah, we can do that.
it'd be really nice to have that on the agenda. We try to do it at least once a year, because that project has been around for a while.
We've made some huge advancements in the last 3 years. So we're doing a new EA adjustment. They've hired David Evans Associates as a consultant on it. So it's really moving forward. So it's
What-
exciting.
What month do you want to think about?
Let's think about it.
Okay.
See what our
Get
schedule
back
looks
to
like.
me.
And we have a lot of things going on with what's going, but I would say in the spring.
Okay.
We should lighten up our load to
Yeah.
dump on you.
So sometime over the next 6 months. I'd say.
Okay.
know.
Okay.
The December meeting.
No. Thank you.
The
So
cut
we-
help us meet.
We have taken the Doug's Ferry realignment and included it all into one project. Goes from Doug's Ferry Road all the way out to Rick Road.
Yeah.
So, and you leave just about Oak Grove Road, just before that is where the boundary of SKATS is. So 9% of that is within the SKATS.
This is huge, and I'd love to hear about the updates and the changes, because that whole Doakes Ferry issue was also very significant for loss of life and injury. And then finding out that it was seismically unsound was just a.
Well, we challenged that and we won't.
We did,
So
okay.
we communicate.
Oh,
All right.
one thing I forgot to mention, because because it was news since this, news to me at least, since this was sent out. So there's another change to the Oregon Transportation Commission. Alonso Simpson was on the commission for a couple of years. He was the longest servicing commissioner from the Portland area. He left for reasons I don't know. And the governor appointed someone from UG. Oh, I'm sorry, not someone. Current Senator Byer. Springfield area. So he's a senator, but he's not going to be in office next January. So he is the governor's nominee for to be on the OTC.
I think it was
approved. It was approved by the Senate committee last Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, Friday was the Senate confirmations.
Yeah. So now, that area usually gets a nod. We never have a OTC member from our area, our 3-county area on the OTC. Are we too close to Salem and the governor's office that they just say, or too close to Portland? I don't know what it is.
Retire, I'll apply to be on the. OT.
All in favor?
Ray rolled his eyes.
Something to bring up in the legislature.
You know what? Yeah, I think that would be something good to bring up because when you look at regional representation, we are a significantly large metropolitan region with Marion Polk Yamhill, and to be able to have the voice at the table at the OTC, specifically around not only what's happening in our metropolitan area, but also our rural areas, and Marion Polk and Yamhill really needs to be addressed. And we've been fighting this for years, especially at MWAC, to get that voice and have our voices be heard. 22 and 51, long overdue. Get that sucker built.
Yeah, I think the OTC generally tries to be agnostic a bit about where they come from, but people are people and they know more about their projects in their area they live, right? And not having a representative for, I think, at least 20 years that I can. Dan, can you think of anyone?
I can't in all my time.
No.
I don't think there's
years,
been
I
one.
can't recall ever a OTC rep from Salem area.
Even the Marion Polk area?
I
Yeah,
can recall, I was trying to think of the closest ones I can even remember.
I've been-
Senator Meyer, Randy Pepe before that,
Yeah.
was from Eugene.
I've been thinking of actually contacting the director's office and say, can you give me the list of all the OTC commissioners, or can you tell me a commissioner that has come from our area? So,
So 22 and 51 first went for funding in year 2000. At that time, it was over capacity. 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And then went to 210, and now we're here at 2022. So
And more
hopefully go
people
for
said.
funding in 2023. No pressure.
We gotta get through the design and the
Yeah.
environmental. We're not gonna be ready by.
I know.
Maybe 2025.
Yeah, good chance.
Yeah.
And then we'll start working on booklet. All right. Oh, yeah.
well, and actually, we are having a presentation on about the Salem Bridge. We were talking about that before the meeting. So the Center Street Bridge was one of those projects on the HB 2017 for funding to do a seismic retrofit. So that's under design, and we're gonna have a presentation in our October MWAC meeting, which is online. So if you're curious about that, you can join us.
October 6th.
October 6th, Thursday, October 6th, 3:30 to 5:30.
So if you could send, 'cause there's a number of us that do span both groups, but not all of us do. So if you would, Lori, would you please include this SKATS members in the invitation for MWAC so they can listen in and get up to speed on the Center Street project? I think that would just make it simpler for us to hear it that way. And some of us have really enjoyed a major knot with the closures on the Marion Street Bridge, so people really need to be prepared for that when the Center Street Bridge project gets
Well-
underway. All right, that is all I have on the agenda. Anything else for the good of the order? I'm not seeing anything, so you all have a great day. It is 1:51 and we are adjourned. Thank you all, everybody.
Thank you.
Live long and prosper.